What up, y'all? St. Pete. Um, just want to do a little book review on this one that I'm reading right now called Wetiko by Paul Levy. Man, it's a heavy hitter. Can't put it down. It's really, really good. Um, it's like spiritual Carl Jung stuff. If you like Carl Jung and um, and you know, dealing with the subconscious and symbolism and basically stuff that Carl Jung was saying, the indigenous tribes and the Native Americans were saying the same thing, just differently. Um, so, awesome book. I'm just going to read a little something from it that I thought was real important. The whole thing is, but really, this is something to try to understand what Wetiko is. It was kind of hard to explain. Um, so you use analogies and allegories to try to describe this mind parasite that that Wetiko is. Um, so let me read this a little bit and see what's up. Speaking about the Epa, Makua makes the point. They could be thought of as psychic vampires. This is who and what vampires really are. As I read Makua's words, the excitement I felt was palpable, for it was like I was reading my own words in someone else's book. Legends and mythologies from time immemorial about vampires, considered the darkest creatures of evil's arsenal, symbolically describe and point at the Epawitiko virus. Epa is just basically what the Hawaiian tradition calls Wetiko and what Carl Jung calls, um, the shadow. So again, it's all the same thing. Vampires symbolically represent the will to power of the human shadow, breaking free of both the wholeness of the human psyche as well as human restraints. As it goes rogue, devotes its allegiance to the dark side and becomes truly demonic. So, the will to power of the human shadow, breaking free of both the wholeness of the human psyche, breaking the masculine and the feminine, making us imbalanced, all right, violating the natural law principle of harmony. When this Wetiko will make you left brain dominant or it'll make you right brain dominant. Anytime you're getting out of your center, this is Wetiko. This is that metaphysical mind parasite that's causing these ideas to permeate that are actually just the false self. They're the ego, you know. They're uh, the way you think other people think, the way you thought about yourself type shit. The way you think other people think, the way you thought about yourself, that reflects, that's your shadow, right? I'm sitting at a bar and I'm looking at a dude across the bar from me, him and his girl sitting there, and there's a TV on top of them. And I'm staring at the TV, I'm watching the TV, and dude gets offended, right? He thinks I'm staring at his girl. He has just revealed to me the way he thinks, other people think, the way he thought about himself. He revealed his insecurities. He played his hand, you know. So that's an example of like Wetiko disease. Whatever it is that made him think that I was staring at his girl when I was watching the TV is an example of this Wetiko and, varying in degrees. Now, this goes for the individual and the collective consciousness. So the collective consciousness is, you know, affected as well as, the individual. So it's like non-local, as I would call it, like Wetiko. The Gnostics called it the archons. There's all different names. All the names, every wisdom tradition has, documented this mind parasite, as they call it. It's like a spiritual cancer. This is like, this is where evil comes from. This is like the cause of evil. This is what causes evil. This is on the metaphysical realms, where we can't see, in the unseen realms. This mind parasite, call them demons. Okay, so vampires are totally missing eros, the quality of human relatedness. Being predators, they only have the ability to relate to others as sources of food, as objects to be used to satisfy their endless narcissistic needs. The vampire archetype is the underlying shapeshifter form that informs the dark potential in all human relations. Casting no reflection in the mirror, which reflects back images of the human soul, the soulless vampire, Wetiko, archon, can't self-reflect. And that's what respect means. Respect means self-reflect. You're respectare, to re-look at something, respect, you know. So, this you can't, this Wetiko prevents you from like self-reflection, which is essentially means that you can't have respect for yourself, which means then you can't give respect to other people. You could call it respect, but it's far from respect. What people call respect and what actually is respect, it's two different things. That's this world we live in, you know what I mean, where everybody has a different definition. There's no objective definition for words. So people are using words and they think it means this thing and he thinks it means this thing and she thinks it means this thing because, that's how they do. They bound you down with words and, bound you down in litigation. You want to fucking look at one of these companies that's been doing some foul shit. They drowned you in paperwork. If you've seen them show Dope Sick, that's what they do. When they started coming at them, they sent a fucking truck with, so much paperwork, they just overloaded them with it. Yeah. What the fuck was I talking about that for? So anyway. Oh, so what I was going to say is that's why they always use symbols. Symbols are worth 1,000 words. You know what I mean? So symbols was the main way of communicating. Like communicating through words is really like a degradation. It's the slow devolving of using words. You know what I mean? Because the words, like again, it's hard to, like I said, if everybody's using different words, I guess if we lived in a world where we were taught that this is what the word means and that words have meaning, and that every word has meaning, and we were like, this is what the definition of the word is, instead of changing it every couple of years and confusing the fuck out of everybody, you know, really that's like the fucking Tower of Babel shit, came down and confused the tongues. Well, I mean, it's the same thing happening in the modern day because they got so many definitions for the word morality, for example. People think morality is subjective. That's a classic example of people who think that morality is just something that they get to make up. It's contingent upon their own personal beliefs, and that's a Wetiko shit. All right. Casting no reflection in the mirror, the soulless vampire Wetiko can't self-reflect. This means that when someone sees them reflecting these seeming entities back to themselves, not only is the reflection of their lack of soul invisible to them, but the one who sees and is mirroring their lack of soul becomes invisible to them as well. Having their reflection turned back on themselves renders them both blind, impotent, and for all practical purposes non-existent. Interestingly, Hannah Arendt points out that an inability to self-reflectively think about ourselves is one of the primary characteristics of evil. In addition to casting no reflection in mythology, vampires cast no shadow. Vampires literally, as well as symbolically, embody the shadow, so there's no need to cast it outside of themselves. To cast a shadow, there needs to be light, and vampires are figures in which no light exists. In addition, that's deep. That's really deep. That there has to be light in order for there to be a shadow. And vampires, they have no light in them at all. I mean, that's like That's like, that's amazing how they did that. Not having a soul, vampires are ultimately empty to the core, unlike us, unlike the human. You know what I mean? Unlike people who have the divine spark in them. You know, not having a soul, vampires are ultimately empty to the core, which is to say that no one is home other than an infinite void, a carnivorous and devouring black hole that is ravenously feeding on the universe. Their atrophied soul has been emptied out like a piece of wood, hollowed out by psychic termites, hence there is nothing to reflect. Being empty of soul, these figures become mere instruments through which the forces of darkness then act themselves out. This is why Ardent writes, the greatest evil perpetrated is the evil committed by nobodies, that is, by human beings who refuse to be persons. Wow. Automatons, just on autopilot. You know, with Tico, the ego is in complete control, and you're just on autopilot every day. As if no longer home, the people so possessed become automatons. These people are so disconnected from their authentic selves that something else, of which they are completely unaware, uses them as its unwitting instrument to fulfill its agenda. Dialoguing with them is like talking to a single algorithm that is running in the brains of millions of other people. It is like a computer program has been implanted in their brains to react to stimuli. The people so programmed have no idea of their situation. They don't even know. That's the craziest part about it. And then when you point it out to people, they'll get mad. They'll defend it. They'll actually defend the um, internal authoritarian. Speaking of the mass brainwashing, mind control, cult like behavior that took place in Nazi Germany, theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed by the Nazis, wrote about his experience of encountering such people. In describing someone taken over by the Wetiko spirit, he characterizes such people as suffering from a form of stupidity. By this, I imagine he means that people so afflicted are disconnected from their natural intelligence. You have to be disconnected from your natural intelligence to do heinous acts, to cause harm to any sentient life. Bonhoeffer writes, in conversation with him, one virtually feels that one is dealing not at all with him as a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of him. And that's all people do, man. They're just echo chambers for catchwords and slogans coming out of Tavistock. He is under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in his very being. Having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will also be capable of any evil and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil. This is where the danger of diabolical misuse lurks, for it is this that can once and for all destroy human beings. In its full-blown form, Wetiko disease turns people into ghosts, demons, zombies, vampires, and members of the living dead. The soul experiences become fixed in an unconscious perspective as a form of living death. For when we become so entrenched in a viewpoint, the possibility of spiritual growth becomes foreclosed. You can't grow and be, protecting. You can't be in protection mode and growth, at the same time. It's either one or the other, what I mean? Because of the way that the blood flows when, your adrenaline's going. So, if you're always in this, in this defend, I'm gonna defend my, you know what I mean? You're constantly in that. You can't be growing. So, I'm talking about like mentally, knowledge wise. If you think you know everything already, then you're crazy. You know what I mean? Like this shit is forever. This is Earth school. You here, you know what I mean, to learn to go. So you better start learning. You better start somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Because all this shit could be learned. So, all right. The soul experience has become fixed in an unconscious perspective as a form of living death. For when we become so entrenched in a viewpoint, the possibility of spiritual growth becomes foreclosed. People so taken over become programmed like robotic machines in order to spread the infection so as to fulfill the agenda of the darker forces that are driving them. Being an archetypal, transpersonal energy, Wetiko can literally take over, possess, and replace a person with itself. To quote from the article, Seeing Wetiko on Capitalism, Mind Viruses, and Antidotes for a World in Transition by Lada and Kirk, Wetiko can describe both the infection and the body infected. A person can be infected by Wetiko, or in cases where the infection is very advanced, can personify the disease. Wow. I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man, is what he's saying. You know what I mean? You ain't just infected with the Wetiko. You are the Wetiko. In other words, someone can become so taken over, possessed by Wetiko, that they can be said to be the living incarnation of the formless, invisible disease in human form. Along similar unholy veins, Professor Jeffrey Burton Russell, author of numerous books on evil, talks about a fundamental warping of the will that underlies individual actions. There are people who have allowed their wills and personalities and lives to be swallowed up by radical evil. It can be hard for us to conceive of people who actually intend and get off on performing acts of evil. That's what good people never understand, that like they think they project their selves onto other people. But our difficulty in seeing this is due to our lack of, in Jung's words, an imagination for evil. Our inability to imagine that such people actually exist serves evil, as it gives them the cover of darkness and obscurity that they desperately crave. Wow. It is completely possible, having happened throughout time to countless people, for the unconscious or an archetype to take over and completely possess a human being. When not in conscious relationship to an activated archetype, the archetype can, to quote Jung's colleague Eric Newman, take possession of men and consume them like malevolent demons. So he's saying for the unconscious or an archetype to take over and completely possess a human being, when not in conscious relationship to an activated archetype. Wow. So that's why you see, like, that's why they were so heavy on symbolism, the indigenous cultures. They were so heavy on symbolism because that symbolism resonated with an archetype, with archetypes in, the collective unconscious, that symbol or that dance, that ritual they did would actually soothe that. That's what the shamanic traditions did. They soothed that Wetiko through them dances, through them rituals, until the Wetiko took over. And then you see in the later civilizations where they started doing blood sacrifices and all that. It's a whole different story. But that's why they were so heavy on the dances and the shamanic dances and, whatever, the rituals. That was the archetypal symbols that we see everywhere. Mind you, like I said before, everything's an archetypal symbol. Every single symbol that you see pretty much anywhere, especially any corporation, any major corporation, you see that symbol. That symbol is thousands of years old at best, at least. So, okay. So what he's saying is, when not in conscious relationship to an activated archetype, the archetype can, to quote Jung's colleague Eric Newman, take possession of men and consume them like malevolent demons. The person or group unconsciously possessed by the archetypes is a cipher of information whose deeper meaning is in need of being deciphered. Embodying the disease in flesh and blood, they are literally and symbolically revealing this previously invisible disease for all who have eyes to see it. All right, I'm going to read one more paragraph. When an individual is taken over by an archetype, which is non-local, not limited in or by space and time, it is interdimensional by definition. So when an individual is taken over by an archetype, their inner circumstance affects and is reflected by the field. Being non-local, the archetype extends itself into the outside world in such a way as to arrange the outer world to express, reflect, and reveal itself. The world, both outer and inner, because that's what we're dealing with. Everything in the outside world is a reflection of the inside world. So because they're not using that symbol to bring that which is in us out of us, because that symbol, the dances, the ceremonies, were to bring that out of us. That has to express itself. That has to be expressed in some healthy kind of way. Because if it isn't expressed and suppressed, that we're doing, which they all say, you know, the Freuds and all of that, we have so much repression of all just natural biological things. And we repress it so fucking much that is why we're so sick. All of us, collectively, we're all sick. We're all suffering. The way you know you're suffering is when you see someone else suffering. That's how you know you're suffering, because it's a collective conscious and an individual conscious. You know what I'm saying? So it's three things: your individual conscious, your subconscious, then the collective conscious, maybe the collective unconscious. You know, I think that's how Jung would put it. But anyway, damn. The world, both outer and inner, then takes on archetypal mythic dimensions. It is in such an atmosphere that synchronistic events occur. The veil between the inner and outer worlds has thinned, become permeable, transparent, and see-through. Man, that's amazing stuff. I'm going to stop right there. That's a lot, but it's deep. And, you know what I'm saying? Thoughts, comments, holla at your boy. Peace. St. Pete, I'm out. Peace.